inside my head. I got books I never ever read. I got secrets in my garden shed. I got a scar where all my urges bled. Got people underneath my bed. I got a place where all my dreams swim with me into your blackest night. As the chillest tones pass my window, I can see a washed out moon through the fog. And then a voice inside my head breaks the analog. Says, follow me down to the valley below. You know, moonlight is bleeding from out of the soul. I survived against the will who I twisted from. You were the one that made her cry. You were the one whose brain moved in circles. Neither an adult nor a child. Now it only moves you forwards, back to the blackness at the same time. Touch the world went back to the tile.
I read something about Porcupine Tree, your band is described as being, or is very often described as being a progressive rock band. But as far as I know, you're not really too happy with this description.
Well, we try very hard to be unique, and we try to be as ungeneric as we can. And by that I mean that we're not interested in playing a particular genre, being a generic band. We don't want to play death metal, we don't want to play progressive rock, we don't want to play space rock. We want to play Porcupine Tree music. And Porcupine Tree music is kind of a mixture of all of the personalities, all of the things we listen to. And we listen to a lot more music than I think some people, and absorb a lot more different kinds of music into our sound than I think some people give us credit for. It is a mixture. I think very often people tend to dismiss anything that is a kind of mixture, particularly if it's kind of slightly arty or slightly more intellectual, as progressive. Because progressive in itself comes from, I mean, the kind of whole genre of progressive rock came from the early 70s. And it was all about bands fusing different kinds of music. So you had bands like Jethro Tull fusing jazz with rock, and you had bands like Pink Floyd fusing the blues with rock. And it was all about fusing new kinds of music with rock and creating albums as opposed to singles. And that's certainly something you can apply to us. You know, we're kind of fusing everything from ambient music to death metal music into what we hope is a unique kind of sound. So it's kind of a little bit lazy for people to dismiss that as it's progressive rock. We have a lot of progressive rock fans, but we also have a lot of metal kids come to our shows who probably have no interest in progressive rock. And we have a lot of people who just like good songwriting, good pop songs, you know, who respond to that side of what we do. So it's not as if, don't get me wrong, I don't loathe the term, and I can kind of understand why it's necessary sometimes, certainly for the media, to categorise music. Otherwise, how do you describe something to someone who hasn't heard it? And it's very hard to describe something that is, in effect, indescribable. I mean, the only way to really understand what we do is to hear it. So in that sense, progressive is as good a label as any other, I guess. to break us both apart. With you I felt brand new, you opened up the sky. What needs to punish me for searching me in the eye? Sleep well, the sun cold when the virus in your heart. Sleep bells, the sun cold when the mist will run apart. In sound escape is found, carving out the day. Never stop the car on a drive in the dark. Never look for the truth in your mother's eyes. Never trust the sound of rain upon a river rushing through your ears. Arriving somewhere, but not here. Did you imagine the final sound as a gun? Or the smashing windscreen of a car? Did you ever imagine the last thing you'd hear as you're fading out was a song? Arriving somewhere, but not here. All my designs simplified. And all of my plans compromised. And all of my dreams sacrificed. Down the poison the way you were taught. Never thought from here on in your life begins and all you knew was wrong. Arriving somewhere, not here. feel the envy for the sons of mothers tearing you apart. Lying somewhere behind me. Hear the sound of music drifting in the aisles. Elevator Prozac stretching on for miles. The music of the future will not entertain. It's only meant to repress and neutralize your brain. Soul gets squeezed out, hedges get blunt. Comes in silver pills, engineered to see cheap building, cheap thrills. The music of rebellion makes you wanna rage, but it's made by millionaires who are nearly twice your age. Soul gets squeezed out, hedges get blunt. going down. It's going down. I know. It's one of the blunders of the world, but no one cares. No one cares. One of the wonders of the world is going down. It's going down. I know. It's one of the blunders of the world, but no one cares. No one cares.
But I read somewhere that you have to be depressed to write music. Why that?
I don't. The simple answer is I don't know why I am like that, but I am. I find that for me, music is in many ways a kind of cathartic experience or a kind of exorcism of negative aspects of my personality. And most of Porcupine Tree music is quite melancholic and quite dark. And people often say to me, your music is very depressing, very melancholic. Is that what you're like as a person? And the answer is no, I'm not, because all of that really, well, not all of it, but a lot of that does go into my art and my creativity. And I think that allows me to be a happier person, and I'm not like that. And I think people are quite surprised very often when they find I'm not like that. They expect me to be some kind of morose, manic, depressive, you know, very negative individual. And I'm not. I'm quite happy, and I think it's almost as if I have this kind of Jekyll and Hyde thing, and the music represents the dark side, and I represent the bright side, the light side. And I don't know why I'm like that. I just am. I guess that's just the way my personality and my creativity tends to function. you. Father never wanted you. I trust to love a little, but you never really felt the same. Something in your heart so cruel.
achieved a lot of things. You're having one big band, you're having a lot of projects. So what is a challenge for Steven Wilson in 2005?
Well, the big thing for me now really is to try and get more involved in other media, because I think for many years people have always said to Porcupine Tree, or to me in particular, your music would be great in films, you know, or it would be, why don't you guys do a soundtrack, or your music's very cinematic, or words to that effect. And I think the next thing for us is to try and do some major visual project. And actually the last album, Deadwing, was based on a film script that I wrote with a friend of mine. So it would be really great for us to try and take that to the next level and try and get the movie made, or try and get something. I mean, you'll see tonight with the show, there's a very strong element of visual media is a big part of the show. The bands sometimes are, you know, just playing, and the show becomes all about the projection and the film. So we like that kind of fusion of visuals and the music. And I think the next challenge for me is to actually try and get either to get a soundtrack commission from a director, and I'd love to, you know, I'd love to make a soundtrack for someone like David Lynch or someone like that, or to actually get our own movie project off the ground. Other than that, it's just continuing to, you know, evolve, to keep the music evolving and keep the music developing into new areas and keep it fresh. out and try to say, give me the freedom to destroy. Cologne. Dankeschön! Train set and match spied under the blind. Shiny and contoured, the railway winds. And I've heard the sound from my cousin's bed, the hiss of the train at the railway head. Oh, wasted summers I slept in away. Pile of When I hear the engine pass, I'm kissing you wide. The hissing subsides, I'm in luck. When evening reaches here, you're tying me up. I'm dying of love. It's okay.